The first call came through to the McDowell County Sheriff's Department at 9:17 on the morning of March 11th, 1983. 12 people would lose their lives before sunset. The men responsible were not criminals. They were not drifters. They were not strangers passing through. They were Harlan Messer and his two eldest sons, Clayton and Earl, third-generation coal miners. Men who had spent their lives 3,000 feet underground, breathing dust that would eventually claim them the same way it claimed their fathers and grandfathers. Harlan was 48 years old, 31 years in the mines, Korean War veteran, the kind of man who had never raised his voice in church, never missed a shift, never asked for anything he had not earned with his own hands. Those hands would hold a rifle that morning. Those hands would not shake. The men who lost their lives were not chosen at random. Every one of them had signed a document. Every one of them had stamped a file. Every one of them had looked a dying miner in the eye and said two words: insufficient documentation. Raymond Sisk, Donald Bevins, Marcus Trent, Frank Deskins. Names that meant nothing to the outside world. Names that meant everything in the coal fields of southern West Virginia. 347 families had received denial letters with those signatures. 347 miners told their black lung was not real, their injuries were pre-existing, their claims were insufficient. Exposed after the incident. A filing cabinet with color-coded folders, green for approved, red for denied. The red section was 4 times larger. But to understand how a man who had never broken a law in his life became capable of what happened that morning, we must go back further. Back to the autumn of 1982. Back to a small office where a man in a grey suit told Harlan Messer that his crippled son, crushed in a roof collapse at 17, did not qualify for compensation. Back to the moment when Harlan realized the system would never protect his family. Because the system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. Disclaimer. We have changed certain names and dates for legal and privacy purposes. If you have the courage to hear this story, leave your like and subscribe to this channel. But I warn you, some of you will condemn these men by the end. Others will understand them. And a few of you, the honest ones, will admit you might have faced the same impossible choice. McDowell County in 1982 was a place the rest of America had forgotten. The county stretched across 500 square miles of the most rugged terrain in Appalachia. Mountains rose steep and sudden from narrow valleys. Roads followed creek beds because there was no other way through. When the fog settled in the hollows, which it did more mornings than not, a man could not see 20 feet in front of his truck. Coal had built this place. Coal had sustained it for 4 generations. At its peak in 1950, McDowell County was home to nearly 100,000 people. The mines ran 3 shifts. Company towns dotted every hollow. Welch, War, Kimball, Gary, Coalwood. A man could drop out of school on Friday and earn union wages by Monday. By 1982, the population had fallen to 49,000. By 1990, it would fall to 35,000. The mines were closing. Mechanization meant one machine could do the work of 40 men. Coal from Wyoming cost less to extract. The unions had been broken, piece by piece, strike by strike. A man could not survive in McDowell County without the mines. There were no other jobs. The nearest city with real employment was 2 hours away on roads that flooded every spring. A man either worked the mines or he left. And if he had worked the mines long enough, leaving was not an option. The dust was already in his lungs. The damage was already done. The unemployment rate in McDowell County reached 31% that autumn. But that number did not account for the men who had stopped looking, did not account for the disabled, did not account for the dying. Raymond Sisk had never set foot in a coal mine. He was 44 years old, regional claims supervisor for Consolidated Insurance Group, the company that handled workers' compensation for 11 mining operations across southern West Virginia. His office sat on the 3rd floor of a brick building in Charleston, 160 miles from the nearest working coalface. He wore grey suits. He drove a Lincoln Continental. He had a corner office with a view of the Kanawha River. His job was simple: deny claims. Every denial saved the mining company's money. Every denial earned Raymond a performance bonus. He had received that bonus every quarter for 7 consecutive years. That same week, Harlan Messer received his son's denial letter. Raymond Sisk signed denial notices for 4 other families. The Blankenship claim, denied, insufficient documentation. The Lester claim, denied, pre-existing condition. The Caudill claim, denied, failure to meet filing deadline. The Hatfield widow, denied, incomplete medical records. He kept a filing cabinet beside his desk, color-coded folders, green for approved, red for denied. The red section required a second cabinet. Raymond called it his productivity file. He showed it to new employees during orientation, proof that efficiency was possible, proof that the system worked. The system worked. For Raymond Sisk. Harlan Messer was born in the same hollow where his grandfather had built a cabin in 1906. The cabin was gone now, replaced by a company house that Harlan's father had purchased outright in 1952. 4 rooms, coal stove, a porch that faced the eastern ridge where the sun broke through for exactly 2 hours each afternoon. He stood 6 feet tall and carried 205 pounds on a frame that had been hardened by 3 decades underground. His hands were thick and blackened, not from dirt, but from coal dust that had worked its way into the creases and cracks until no amount of scrubbing could remove it. Every miner's hands looked the same after enough years. The mountain marked its men. Harlan's father, Walter, had started in the mines at 14, worked 41 years, never missed a shift until the coughing started. By then the dust had eaten through his lungs like acid through paper. He filed for black lung benefits in 1979. Raymond Sisk denied the claim. Insufficient documentation. Walter Messer passed 8 months later. Drowning in fluid, his lungs could no longer clear. His last weeks were spent in a back bedroom, propped up on pillows because lying flat meant suffocation. Harlan's brother Boyd followed the same path. 29 years underground. The cough started in 1980. The claim was filed in 1981. Raymond Sisk denied it. Insufficient documentation. Same words, same signature, same stamp. Boyd passed in February of 1982. Same bedroom, same pillows, same slow suffocation. Harlan had enlisted in the Marines right out of high school in 1953. He served in Korea. Outpost Harry, the Kumsong salient. Places that meant nothing to anyone who had not been there and everything to those who had. He came home in 1956 with a scar on his left shoulder and a silence he never fully explained to his wife. Ruth had married him in 1958, 24 years. She had grown up 2 hollows over, daughter of a machinist who serviced the equipment at the Pocahontas No. 6 mine. She knew what she was marrying into, knew the risks, knew the odds. They had 3 sons. Clayton came first, born 1956, then Earl in 1959, then Jimmy in 1964. Clayton and Earl followed their father into the mines. There was no other choice, no other path. The mines were the only employer, and a Messer man worked. That was the way of things. Jimmy was different, faster mind. His teachers said he could go to college if the family could afford it. Ruth had saved $11,000 over 15 years. A secret account Harlan knew about but never mentioned. It was going to send Jimmy to Bluefield State, get him out, break the chain. Then came September of 1981. Jimmy was 17, working summer shifts to add to the college fund. Roof collapse in Section C of the consolidated No. 4 mine. 14 tons of rock dropped without warning. Jimmy's back was crushed, 3 vertebrae shattered. The doctors said he would walk again, but never without pain, never without a limp, never without the knowledge that his body had been broken before his life had truly begun. The disability claim was filed in October of 1981. Raymond Sisk denied it in December. Pre-existing condition, the letter said. The medical review, conducted by Dr. Donald Bevins, a physician on Consolidated's payroll, determined that the spinal damage was consistent with a congenital defect, not an acute injury. Jimmy had been a varsity athlete, baseball, track. No medical history of back problems, no prior complaints, no evidence of any defect. None of that mattered. The denial stood. Harlan appealed. The appeal was denied. He hired a lawyer with money the family did not have. The lawyer said the case could take 3 years, maybe 4. No guarantee of success. Meanwhile, Jimmy could not work, could barely walk. The college fund was gone. Spent on medical bills the insurance refused to cover. Ruth stopped sleeping through the night. Harlan's hands began to shake for the first time in his life. And in Charleston, 160 miles away, Raymond Sisk added another red folder to his cabinet and calculated his quarterly bonus. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in January of 1983. Final denial. No further appeals available. The matter was closed. Harlan read it 3 times. The words did not change. The signature at the bottom, Raymond Sisk, Regional Claims Supervisor, was the same signature that had appeared on his father's denial, the same signature on his brother's denial, the same signature that had condemned his son to a life of pain without compensation. 3 generations of Messer men, 3 denials, 1 signature. Ruth found him sitting on the porch at dusk. The letter was folded in his hand. His knuckles were white. She did not ask what it said. She already knew. That same afternoon in Charleston, Raymond Sisk sat across from a woman named Edna Caudill, 61 years old. Husband passed from black lung the previous spring. She had driven 3 hours to make her case in person. "Mrs. Caudill," Raymond said, "the medical documentation is incomplete. My husband worked 38 years underground, 38 years. The filing deadline. He was too sick to file. He could barely breathe." Raymond clicked his pen. The same pen he always used, the same gesture. "The deadline is clearly stated in the policy documents. Your husband had 90 days from diagnosis. He passed 63 days after diagnosis. Then the claim should have been filed within those 63 days. Edna Caudill began to cry. Raymond checked his watch. "I have another appointment, Mrs. Caudill. My assistant will show you out." He stamped her file. Denied. Added it to the red section. His quarterly bonus was secure. Harlan drove to Charleston on the first Thursday of February, 160 miles, 3 hours each way. He wore his only suit, the one Ruth had bought for Boyd's funeral. The receptionist told him Mr. Sisk was unavailable. Harlan waited. 4 hours. The receptionist told him to leave twice. He did not leave. At 4:45, Raymond Sisk walked through the lobby on his way to the parking garage. Harlan stood. "Mr. Sisk?" Raymond stopped, looked him over. The worn suit, the blackened hands, the posture of a man who had spent decades underground. "Do I know you?" "Harlan Messer. You denied my son's claim. You denied my brother's claim. You denied my father's claim." Raymond's expression did not change. "I process hundreds of claims, Mr. Messer. I cannot discuss individual cases in a public lobby. My son was 17. He was crushed in your mine. Your doctor said it was a birth defect. It was not a birth defect. If you have new medical evidence, you may submit it through the appropriate channels. I submitted it. You denied it." Raymond glanced toward the security desk. "Mr. Messer, the claims process is clearly outlined in your policy documents. If you cannot provide sufficient documentation—" "My father suffocated in his own bedroom. My brother suffocated in the same bedroom. Both denied. Same words, same signature. Your signature." Raymond straightened his tie. "I am sorry for your losses, but I do not make the policies. I enforce them. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a dinner reservation." He walked past Harlan without another word. That evening, at the Charleston Country Club, Raymond told the story over bourbon. The miner who had ambushed him in the lobby, the worn suit, the shaking hands, the desperation. "These people," Raymond said, "they think the rules do not apply to them. They think if they show up and cry, we will write them a check." The men at the table laughed. "What did you tell him?" someone asked. "I told him to follow the appropriate channels." Raymond smiled. "Same thing I tell all of them." More laughter. Raymond ordered another drink. He did not think about Harlan Messer again. He would remember that laughter, on a different morning, in a different room, when appropriate channels no longer mattered. Harlan tried the legal route. He contacted the state mining board. The complaint was logged and assigned a number. He was told an investigator would review the case within 6 to 8 months. He contacted his congressman. He received a form letter thanking him for his concern. He contacted a reporter at the Charleston Gazette. The reporter said he would look into it. Harlan never heard from him again. He contacted the United Mine Workers. The union representative said Raymond Sisk had been flagged before. Dozens of complaints. Nothing had changed. Nothing would change. The insurance companies owned the politicians. The politicians appointed the regulators. The regulators approved the policies. The system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. On the last night of February, Harlan sat at the kitchen table with Clayton and Earl. Ruth had gone to bed. Jimmy was asleep in the back room, the same room where Harlan's father had suffocated, where his brother had suffocated. The three men did not speak for a long time. Then Clayton said what they were all thinking. "Nobody is coming to help us." Earl nodded. Harlan looked at his sons. 31 years underground. His father gone, his brother gone, his youngest son crippled and denied. 3 generations of Messer men, broken, buried, dismissed. "No," Harlan said. "Nobody is coming." He placed his hands flat on the table. Those hands that had never shaken until now. Those hands that had built a life in these mountains. Those hands that had carried his father's coffin and his brother's coffin. "So we go to them." Clayton and Earl did not ask what he meant. They already knew. Harlan watched the insurance building for 3 days. Raymond Sisk arrived at 8:15 every morning. Black Lincoln Continental. Same parking spot. 3rd row, nearest the elevator entrance. He carried a leather briefcase in his left hand and a coffee cup in his right. He never looked around, never checked his surroundings. A man who had never once considered that consequences might follow him to work. He left at 5:30, drove to the Charleston Country Club, stayed until 7, then home. A brick colonial in South Hills, 4 bedrooms, a lawn service that came every Thursday. No security, no alarm signs in the windows, no dog. A man who had destroyed 347 families and never once felt afraid. Clayton handled the other names. Dr. Donald Bevins, the company physician who signed the medical reviews. He worked in the same building as Raymond. 4th floor. Arrived at 9, left at 4. Drove a brown Oldsmobile. Ate lunch at his desk. Frank Deskins, the mine superintendent who had falsified the safety reports before Jimmy's accident. The inspection records showed Section C had been cleared 2 weeks before the collapse. Deskins had signed the clearance. He lived 18 miles outside Welch, alone since his wife left him in 1980. Marcus Trent, regional vice president, Raymond's boss, the man who had designed the denial system and rewarded those who enforced it. He worked in the same Charleston building, 6th floor, corner office. Earl found the state inspector, Howard Brannock, the man who had taken payments from Consolidated to overlook violations. He lived in a motel outside Beckley, separated from his wife, spending his bribe money on whiskey and weekend trips to the dog track. The Messer family had 3 rifles, a Remington 30-06 that had belonged to Harlan's father, a Winchester lever action that Clayton had bought in 1975, a Marlin 30-30 that Earl used for deer. They had hunted these mountains their entire lives. Deer, turkey, boar. They knew how to move quietly, how to wait, how to breathe. This was different. Harlan sat with his sons on the porch the night before. "We do this. There is no coming back." Clayton nodded. "There is nothing to come back to," Earl said, looking toward the back room where Jimmy slept, where their grandfather had suffocated, where their uncle had suffocated. Harlan followed his gaze. "They took everything from this family, everything except what we do next." The mountains were silent around them. No wind, no birds, just the dark and the cold and the weight of what was coming. At dawn, they loaded the truck, March 11th, 1983, 6:14 in the morning. The truck left the hollow before first light. Harlan drove. Clayton sat beside him. Earl rode in the bed with the rifles wrapped in canvas. The fog was thick in the valleys. Harlan knew these roads without needing to see them. 48 years in these mountains. Every curve, every crossing, every hollow where a man could disappear and never be found. They did not speak. 160 miles to Charleston. Raymond Sisk woke at 6:30 that morning. Same routine. Coffee from the machine his wife had ordered from a catalogue. The newspaper folded beside his plate. He turned to the business section without glancing at the local news. The headline mentioned unemployment in the coalfields reaching 34%. Raymond did not read it. He dressed in the grey suit, the burgundy tie his daughter had given him for Christmas. He checked his reflection in the hallway mirror. A man in control, a man of importance, a man whose signature carried weight. He kissed his wife on the cheek, told her he would be late. Dinner meeting with Marcus Trent to discuss quarterly numbers. He would not return. The Messer truck reached Charleston at 9:03. Clayton had mapped the building the week before. Parking garage on the east side, stairwell access on each floor, security desk in the main lobby, 1 guard before noon, 2 after. They parked on the street, 3 men in work clothes, invisible in a city that had forgotten what work looked like. Harlan carried the Remington in a canvas bag. Clayton had the Winchester. Earl had the Marlin and a hunting knife on his belt. They entered through the parking garage. The first man was a security guard named Wesley Combs, 26 years old. He had taken the job 3 months earlier because the factory where he had worked closed down. He was standing by the elevator when the stairwell door opened. He saw the rifles. He reached for his radio. The Remington spoke once. Wesley Combs fell against the concrete pillar and did not rise. His radio clattered across the floor. Static hissed from the speaker. Harlan stepped over him without looking down. The elevator took them to the 3rd floor. The receptionist saw them first. A woman named Darlene, who had worked the front desk for 11 years. She opened her mouth to speak. No sound came out. "Where is Raymond Sisk?" Harlan asked. She pointed down the hall. Her hand was shaking. "Leave. Do not come back." Darlene ran. The first office belonged to a claims processor named Harold Vance, 41 years old. He had signed 612 denial letters in the past 18 months. He was on the telephone when the door opened. He looked up. The Winchester spoke. Harold Vance slumped forward onto his desk. The telephone receiver dangled from its cord, a voice still asking hello on the other end. The second office was empty. The third belonged to Dr. Donald Bevins, the company physician, the man who had examined Jimmy's medical records and declared a crushed spine to be a birth defect. He was standing by the window when Clayton entered. He turned. His face went pale. "I know who you are," Bevins said. "The Messer boy. You said my brother had a birth defect. I only wrote what the examination showed. He was a varsity athlete. No medical history. No complaints." Bevins backed against the glass. "I was following protocol. The company has standards for these reviews. 3 generations of my family, all denied, all signed by men in this building. Please, I have children." Clayton thought about Jimmy, 17 years old, crushed, crippled, denied. The Winchester spoke again. Bevins slid down the window and did not rise. A dark stain spread beneath him on the carpet. Raymond heard the sounds from his office. He stood from his desk, walked to the door, opened it. Down the hall, he saw Harold Vance's still form slumped across his desk. He saw the men with rifles moving toward him. He recognized Harlan Messer, the worn suit, the blackened hands, the same man he had dismissed in the lobby 6 weeks earlier. Raymond's legs went weak. He closed the door, locked it, backed against the wall. His hands were shaking. The same tremor he had seen in Harlan's hands that day in the lobby. The same tremor he had mocked at the country club. He understood now what desperation looked like from the other side. Marcus Trent was descending the stairwell from the 6th floor when Earl found him. Trent was 53 years old, regional vice president, the architect of the denial system. He had calculated, 5 years earlier, that aggressive claim rejection would save the company $14 million annually. He had been promoted twice since then. He saw Earl on the landing below him, saw the rifle. He turned to run back up the stairs. The Marlin spoke. Trent tumbled forward. His body came to rest on the landing between floors. His briefcase opened on impact, papers scattering like leaves. Earl stepped over him and continued down. 2 more office workers tried to flee through the emergency exit. A man named Curtis and a woman named Patricia. Neither had signed denial letters. Neither had made policy decisions. But they had processed the paperwork. They had stamped the files. They had added folders to Raymond's cabinet, green and red, approved and denied. They made it to the parking garage. Harlan was waiting. Curtis raised his hands. "I just work here. I just process files." "You processed my son's file. I did not make the decision. You made it possible." The Remington spoke twice. Two still forms on the concrete. Harlan's hands did not shake. Raymond heard the shots echo up through the stairwell. He fumbled for the telephone on his desk. Dialed 911. Busy signal. He dialed again. Same signal. The entire building was trying to call at once. He dropped the receiver, looked around the office. No window exit. Third floor. No back door. One entrance. Locked, but the lock was hollow core. It would not hold. He crawled beneath his desk. A man who had destroyed 347 families was hiding like a child. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. The door handle turned. Stopped. Locked. Silence. Then the door exploded inward. One kick. The frame splintered. Harlan stepped through. Raymond pressed himself against the back of the desk well. His breathing was ragged. A dark stain spread across the front of his grey trousers. Harlan walked around the desk, looked down. "Stand up." Raymond could not move. "I said stand up." Harlan grabbed him by the collar, lifted him, threw him against the filing cabinet. The cabinet with the color-coded folders. Green for approved, red for denied. Raymond's back struck the handle. He gasped. "Please, I have children." Otha Blankenship had children. He filed a claim. You denied it. He drove his truck into a river 2 weeks later. I did not make him do that. Curtis Lester had children. You denied his claim. His family lost their home. I follow policy. I do not make policy. Harlan opened the top drawer of the cabinet. Red folders. Dozens of them. He pulled one at random. Hensley, black lung, denied. He pulled another. Cordill, widow claim, denied. Another. Phelps, disability, denied. He threw the folders at Raymond's chest. 347 families, I counted. Raymond was crying now, tears cutting lines through the sweat on his face. I will give it back, all of it, the claims. I will approve them, everyone. 6 weeks ago, I would have taken that deal. Raymond's mouth opened, closed. You told me to follow appropriate channels. Harlan raised the Remington. You told your friends I was a joke. You laughed about my hands. I am sorry. I am sorry. My father suffocated in his bedroom. My brother suffocated in the same bedroom. My son cannot walk, cannot work, cannot live the life he earned. Raymond raised his hands. Your signature is on all of them. Every denial, every file. Please. You said it was just business. Harlan pulled the trigger. Raymond Sisk fell against his filing cabinet and slid to the floor. Red folders scattered around him. 347 names, 347 families. The account was settled. Earl found Frank Deskins at his home outside Welch that afternoon. The mine superintendent was sitting on his porch when the truck pulled up the gravel drive. He saw the Messer boys, saw what they carried. He did not run. I wondered when you would come, Deskins said. You signed the safety clearance 2 weeks before the collapse. Deskins nodded. I signed a lot of clearances. They told me to sign. I signed. My brother is crippled because of that signature. Deskins looked at his hands. I know. The Marlin spoke. Deskins fell from his chair. The porch boards creaked beneath his weight. Earl stood over him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to the truck. The state inspector, Howard Brannock, was at a motel outside Beckley, room 14. He had been there for 3 weeks, spending his bribe money on whiskey and waiting for his wife to return his calls. She never would. Clayton knocked on the door at 4:17. Brannock opened it, saw the rifle. I should have known, he said. You took money to overlook violations. Men lost their lives because of what you ignored. Brannock laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You think I was the only one? You think this changes anything? It changes something. The Winchester spoke. Brannock fell backward into the room. The television was still playing, a game show, applause from an audience that would never know what had happened in room 14. Clayton closed the door behind him. The final name was Howard Ramey, Consolidated Coal local manager, the man who had pressured Deskins to sign false safety reports, the man who had called the Messer family troublemakers when Harlan filed his first complaint. He was driving home on Route 52 when the Messer truck appeared behind him. Ramey recognized the truck, recognized what it meant. He floored the accelerator. His sedan pulled ahead. The truck followed. 2 miles. 3. The road curved along the river. Ramey took a turn too fast. His tires lost grip on the gravel shoulder. The sedan went through the guardrail and down the embankment. Harlan stopped the truck, walked to the edge. Ramey was crawling from the wreckage. His leg was broken. He was pulling himself up the slope with his hands. He saw Harlan standing above him. "Messer, please. You called my family troublemakers. You said we should be grateful for the work. I was wrong. I was wrong about all of it. Yes, you were." The Remington spoke one final time. The echo rolled across the hollow and faded into silence. 12 people lost their lives that day. The debt was paid, but the Messer family was not finished. Not yet. There was still the matter of the evidence, the filing cabinet, the color-coded folders, and the question of what comes after a man has done the unthinkable. The first 911 call that connected came at 9:23. By 9:45, every patrol car in Charleston was converging on the insurance building. By 10:15, the state police had been notified. By noon, the FBI field office in Huntington had dispatched a team. Detective Randall Klein arrived at the scene at 10:07. He was 52 years old, West Virginia State Police, 31 years on the job. He had grown up in McDowell County, same hollows, same mountains, same coal dust in his family's lungs. His father had worked the Pocahontas No. 9 until the black lung took him in 1971. Klein had left the coalfields at 18, joined the state police, never went back. Now the coalfields had come to him. The parking garage held 3 still forms. Wesley Combs by the elevator, Curtis and Patricia near the emergency exit. Klein walked past them without stopping. He had seen enough to know this was not random, not robbery, not rage. This was a list. The 3rd floor was worse. Harold Vance slumped at his desk, Dr. Donald Bevins beneath the window, 2 more in the hallway, claims processors who had tried to hide in a supply closet, and Raymond Sisk. Klein found him in his office, slumped against a filing cabinet, red folders scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. He crouched beside the cabinet, opened the top drawer. Names, dates, claim numbers, each folder stamped in red ink, denied. He counted the folders, 347. "Jesus Christ," Klein said. His partner, a younger detective named Harris, appeared in the doorway. "What is it?" Klein held up a folder. Hensley. Black lung, denied. Motive, every piece of it, exposed and documented. He turned the pages. The Blankenship family, the Lesters, the Cordill widow. Name after name after name. The Messer family was listed on page 43. 3 entries. Walter Messer. Denied, 1979. Boyd Messer. Denied, 1981. James Messer. Denied, 1982. 3 generations. Same signature on every denial. "We need to find out who filed these claims," Klein said. "Start with the most recent denials. Cross-reference with anyone who made threats, filed complaints, or showed up at the office." Harris nodded. "That could be hundreds of people." "Then we better start now." The connection came faster than Klein expected. By 2 o'clock, a clerk in the records department had found the complaint log. Harlan Messer had filed 11 formal complaints over 18 months. He had appeared at the Charleston office in February. Security had logged his name. By 3 o'clock, they had the address. A hollow outside Welch, McDowell County. By 4 o'clock, the state police had dispatched units to the location. The Messer truck was not there, but Ruth Messer was. She was sitting on the porch when the cruisers pulled up. She did not stand, did not run, did not seem surprised. Klein approached alone. "Mrs. Messer?" She nodded. "I am Detective Randall Klein, State Police. I need to ask you some questions about your husband." Ruth looked at him. Her eyes were red, but she was not crying. She had finished crying months ago. "I know why you are here." "Where is your husband, ma'am?" She looked toward the eastern ridge. The sun was already dropping behind the mountains. "He went to settle accounts." "Mrs. Messer, 12 people are gone. I need to know where he is." Ruth turned back to Klein. "My father-in-law suffocated in the back bedroom of this house. My brother-in-law suffocated in the same bedroom. My youngest son was crushed in a mine collapse and denied compensation by men who never set foot underground." She paused. "You want to know where Harlan is? He is finishing what should have been finished a long time ago." "I need you to come with me, ma'am." Ruth stood slowly. She did not resist, did not argue. "There is soup on the stove for Jimmy. He cannot cook for himself anymore. Not since the accident." Klein nodded to one of the officers. "Make sure the boy is taken care of." They found Frank Deskins at 5:43. His porch, his chair overturned. They found Howard Brannock at 6:15. Motel room 14. Television still playing. They found Howard Ramey at 7:02. His sedan at the bottom of an embankment along Route 52. His still form halfway up the slope. 12 people. One day, one family. The largest coordinated incident in West Virginia history. The phone calls started the morning after the newspapers published Raymond Sisk's name. Margaret Phelps called the state police tip line first. She did not have information about the Messer family. She had information about Raymond Sisk. "I am not saying what they did was right," she said. "I am saying I understand why they did it." Then the Blankenships called. Then the Lesters. Then the Hatfield widow. Then families Klein had never heard of. Names from the red folders. Names from the denied claims. Names from the system that had crushed them all. The Charleston Gazette ran the story on March 13th. Front page, above the fold. Exposed. Insurance executive denied. 347 claims before incident, the filing cabinet. The color-coded folders. The quarterly bonuses tied to denial rates. All of it documented. All of it undeniable. Letters arrived at the newspaper office by the dozens. Then by the hundreds. Some condemned the Messer family. Murderers. Vigilantes. Men who had taken the law into their own hands. Others saw it differently. "Raymond Sisk killed my husband," one letter read. "He just used paperwork instead of a rifle." The community split down the middle. In Charleston, people demanded justice. Lock them up. Throw away the key. This is not how civilized people solve problems. In the coalfields, people said something else. Something quieter. Something they would only say to neighbors they trusted. 3 generations of Messers, they said. All denied, all gone. What did anyone expect? The Messer family surrendered at dawn on March 14th. Harlan had driven through the night, back through the mountains, back through the fog, back to the hollow where his grandfather had built a cabin in 1906. He parked the truck in the yard, told Clayton and Earl to wait inside, walked alone to the small cemetery on the hill behind the house. 3 headstones, Walter Messer, Boyd Messer, and an empty plot where Harlan had always known he would rest. He stood there until the sun broke over the eastern ridge. Then the cruisers arrived. Klein stepped out first, alone, no weapon drawn. Harlan turned to face him. "Detective." "Mr. Messer." The 2 men looked at each other. Klein saw the blackened hands, the worn clothes, the posture of a man who had spent 31 years underground. "You know why I am here?" Harlan nodded. "My sons are inside. They will not resist." "And you?" Harlan looked back at the headstones. "I have done what I came to do. There is nothing left to resist." He placed his hands behind his back. Klein approached slowly, pulled the cuffs from his belt. "Harlan Messer, you are under arrest." Harlan did not respond. Klein secured the cuffs. They stood together in the morning light. "My father was a miner," Klein said quietly. "Pocahontas number 9. Black lung took him in 71. Harlan turned his head. "Did he file a claim?" Klein nodded. "What happened?" Klein did not answer. He did not need to. They walked down the hill together. Clayton and Earl were waiting on the porch. They did not run, did not fight. They placed their hands behind their backs and waited for the cuffs. Ruth watched from the window. Jimmy watched from his bed in the back room, the same room where his grandfather had suffocated, the same room where his uncle had suffocated. The cruisers pulled away. The hollow fell silent. And in Charleston, the filing cabinet sat in an evidence room. 347 red folders, 347 families, 347 reasons why 12 people had lost their lives on a cold morning in March. The system had created Harlan Messer. The system would now judge him. The trial began in September of 1983. The prosecution called it premeditated, calculated, an act of domestic terrorism that had claimed 12 innocent lives. The defense called it something else. Thomas Hensley took the stand on the fourth day. He was 31 years old. His father, Harold, had worked the mines for 38 years before the black lung diagnosis. Raymond Sisk had denied the claim. Harold Hensley had driven his truck into a river 2 weeks later. "Mr. Hensley," the defense attorney said, "can you describe what happened after your father's claim was denied?" Thomas stared at the jury. "My father could not breathe, could not work, could not pay his bills. He went to Charleston 3 times. 3 times they told him his paperwork was insufficient." "What happened to your family after he passed?" "My mother lost the house. My sister dropped out of school to work at a diner. My brother joined the army because there was nothing else." "Did anyone from the insurance company reach out to your family?" Thomas laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "They sent a bill for the remaining balance on the medical expenses, 2 weeks after the funeral." Margaret Phelps testified the following day. 63 years old, widow. Her husband had worked 38 years underground. "Raymond Sisk sat across from me in his office," she said. "I told him my husband had given his lungs to that company. 38 years. I told him I had nowhere to go." "What did Mr. Sisk say?" "He said that was not a banking concern. Then he stamped my file and called for his assistant." The prosecution objected. Relevance. The judge allowed the testimony to continue. 14 families testified over 6 days, 14 stories, 14 denials, the same signature on every document, the same words, insufficient documentation, pre-existing condition, failure to meet filing deadline. The jury heard about Otha Blankenship, denied, found in his truck 2 weeks later. They heard about Curtis Lester, denied, family lost their home, children scattered across 3 states. They heard about the Caudill widow, denied, because her husband had been too sick to file paperwork before he passed. 347 families. The prosecution said that number was irrelevant. The defense said it was the only number that mattered. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Harlan Messer received 12 consecutive life sentences, no possibility of parole. Clayton Messer received 12 consecutive life sentences, no possibility of parole. Earl Messer received 12 consecutive life sentences, no possibility of parole. The judge called it justice. The Coalfields called it something else. Harlan was transferred to Mount Olive Correctional Complex in January of 1984. Maximum security. He was 50 years old. The first year, he received over 2,000 letters. Minors, widows, children of men who had suffocated in back bedrooms across Appalachia. Some condemned him, most did not. He answered every letter by hand. The same blackened hands that had held a rifle, the same hands that had carried his father's coffin and his brother's coffin. He never spoke publicly about what he had done, never gave interviews, never expressed regret. When a reporter asked him if he would do it again, Harlan said only this: "I did what the system forced me to do. If you want to prevent men like me, change the system." The system did not change. Harlan Messer passed in March of 1997, 14 years into his sentence. The official cause was respiratory failure, black lung, the same disease that had taken his father, the same disease that had taken his brother. The dust had been in his lungs for decades. It simply took longer to finish its work. He was buried in the hollow where he was born, the same cemetery where his father rested, the same cemetery where his brother rested. The plot he had always known would be his. Ruth was there. Clayton and Earl were not permitted to attend. 17 people came to the service, miners, neighbors, families from the red folders. Nobody from Charleston came. Clayton Messer served 23 years before a heart attack took him in 2006. He was 70 years old. He had never married, never had children. His entire adult life had been spent underground or behind bars. Earl Messer remained incarcerated. As of the recording of this account, he is 71 years old. He has been denied parole 11 times. The families of those who lost their lives in Charleston attend every hearing. They bring photographs, they read statements. They ensure that Earl Messer will remain behind bars until the day he passes. He has never expressed regret. When asked at his most recent parole hearing why he participated in the events of March 1983, Earl said only this: "They took my grandfather. They took my uncle. They took my brother's legs. They were going to take us all, one by one, generation by generation. We just stopped waiting for them to finish." Parole denied. Jimmy Messer, the youngest son, the one who was supposed to escape, never left McDowell County. The college fund was gone. His body was broken. His family was imprisoned or gone. He lived in the same house where his grandfather had suffocated, the same house where his uncle had suffocated. Ruth cared for him until her own health failed in 1992. After that, he cared for himself. He walks with a cane now. The pain never stopped. The compensation never came. He is 59 years old. When a documentary filmmaker interviewed him in 2018, Jimmy said something that made the producers cut the segment from the final edit. "People ask me if I am angry at my father, for what he did, for leaving me alone." He paused. "I am angry at the men who made him into what he became. My father was not a violent man. He was a miner. He followed the rules. He filed the paperwork. He trusted the system." Another pause. The system taught him what trust was worth. The segment never aired. Ruth Messer passed in 2001. She was 73 years old. She had spent the last 18 years of her life alone in the Hollow. Her husband gone, her 2 eldest sons imprisoned, her youngest son crippled in body and spirit. She never gave interviews, never spoke to reporters, never defended what her family had done. But she kept a box under her bed. Letters, hundreds of them, from miners' widows, from children who had grown up without fathers, from families across Appalachia who had received the same denial letters, the same signatures, the same insufficient documentation. The box was buried with her. The other families fared no better. Harold Hensley's widow remarried in 1985. Her new husband was a factory worker from Ohio. She never returned to West Virginia. The Blankenship children scattered after their father passed. One joined the military. One moved to Florida. One was incarcerated for drug offenses in 1991. The family has not gathered in the same room since 1984. Margaret Phelps passed in a nursing home in 1986. Medicaid. Shared room. Her farm became a shopping center. A dollar store stands where her husband planted corn for 40 years. The Lester family lost track of each other entirely. The youngest daughter hired a private investigator in 2012 to find her siblings. She located one. The other 2 had passed. One from an overdose. One from an accident on an oil rig in Texas. The Burton Orchard, 5 generations of apple trees, is now a gas station and a fast food restaurant. The family received $14,000 for the land. The developer sold it 3 years later for $260,000. None of these families were called victims at the trial. Legally, Raymond Sisk had never committed a crime against them. Legally. Consolidated Insurance Group paid a settlement of $4.7 million to the families of those who lost their lives in the Charleston incident. The settlement included no admission of wrongdoing. Raymond Sisk's filing cabinet was entered into evidence and sealed. The 347 families in those red folders received nothing. No compensation, no acknowledgement, no justice. The insurance company reopened 4 months after the incident. New name, new regional supervisor, same policies. In 1989, the savings and loan crisis collapsed the American banking system. The federal government bailed out the institutions responsible. Taxpayers covered the losses. Nobody bailed out the Messer family. Nobody bailed out the Hensleys or the Blankenships or the Phelps widow. In 2008, the financial crisis destroyed millions of American families. The government bailed out the banks. The executives received bonuses. The families received foreclosure notices. The system that created Harlan Messer did not end in 1983. It continued. It continues still. Different names, different industries, Different signatures on the denial letters. Same system, same harvest. Was Harlan Messer a murderer? By law, yes. 12 people lost their lives because of his decisions. 12 families were destroyed. 12 futures were erased. But the law is not the only measure of a man. Raymond Sisk signed 347 denial letters. How many families were destroyed? How many futures were erased? How many men suffocated in back bedrooms while their claims sat in red folders? The law never charged Raymond Sisk with anything. Was he innocent? Harlan Messer believed in the system. He filed complaints. He hired lawyers. He followed appropriate channels. The system told him to wait. The system told him to submit more paperwork. The system told him his suffering was insufficient documentation. So he stopped believing in the system, and 12 people lost their lives. You have heard this story. You have followed Harlan Messer from the hollow where he was born to the prison where he passed. Now you must answer the question that no court could answer. Was he a monster? Or was he a man who ran out of options in a system designed to crush men like him? The Messer family wanted justice. They received life sentences. Raymond Sisk wanted profit. He received a quarterly bonus. The system wanted compliance. It received a lesson. That lesson was written in those red folders. 347 names, 347 families, 347 reasons why a man who had never broken a law in his life became capable of the unthinkable. That lesson sits in an evidence room in Charleston, sealed, forgotten. But the families remember, the coalfields remember, and now you will remember too. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. Tell us which side you stand on. Tell us whether Harlan Messer was a man pushed beyond his limits or a man who crossed a line that should never be crossed. Subscribe to this channel. The bell icon ensures you will not miss the next story, because there are more stories like this one. More families, more filing cabinets, more red folders, more men who stopped waiting for justice and decided to deliver it themselves. The mountains keep their secrets, but we tell them anyway.